Take me to another place where the fairy tales don't end. Magical, magical land. Magical, magical land. To another place where the fairy tales don't end. Magical, magical land.
Today's show is a slightly different format. It is an innovation breakfast format where I will meet with previous guests to explore specific topics. So today we're going to explore entrepreneurial cultures. So please welcome to the show Dennis Luja, Joshua Nuttall, and Werner Puchert. Welcome everyone. It's great to have you. How are you doing?
Hey.
Very good.
Goeiedag.
Good to be here.
Fellow South Africans and Dutch folks.
Hello.
It's good to be here, Jens.
And Germans.
And
please.
Germans.
And Germans. Molweni Salbona.
Yeah, you're bringing it. Joshua, you're bringing it. I like that.
So we're now connected over 2 continents. That's awesome. And for a breakfast even.
Yeah.
So that you guys are 1 hour later, officially. Or, Joshua, is it 1 hour later?
No, Joshua's in the same space, right? Same time.
We're just 1 hour behind CET. Yeah.
Oh, you're in.
Daylight savings. South Africa doesn't believe in daylight savings. They just get stuff done. They don't want to sleep. You know.
That's fitting to the entrepreneurial culture topic today.
Exactly.
So let's get into this. Let's start very broad. What is entrepreneurial culture in organization? What it is about? Who wants to start?
Entrepreneurial culture.
Good, Dennis.
You know, the weird thing is that people tend to put such a load on the word entrepreneurial. In I don't know, in Dutch it's ondernemend zijn.
Yeah.
So you get people saying we need more ondernemende people, so we need more entrepreneurs, which is like an open ticket to saying we need people with a go-get attitude that solve stuff on the go. And that's not something that should be like an official statement by the CEO saying, guys, you have free reign to do whatever you want to do outside of your regular way of working. I don't know if that works in a company, but they do want it. They say, we want to have more go-get mentality and not people following orders. But if you get people to do that, then suddenly they say, no, but that far is too far. So entrepreneurial in a company is maybe only fit for certain people, maybe only in innovation. I don't know.
So I can shoot.
What's your thought?
My thoughts are maybe a little bit different, and I have to anchor it in where I actually learned about entrepreneurial spirit. So, I mean, in my career, I've been all over the place in different things, and there's always this kind of challenge of how you try and define yourself as an offering to the market, and am I a designer? Am I a creative? Am I an experience designer? And it was when I was at Deloitte that I realized what it means to be entrepreneurial, and it's kind of a mindset. Because in the organization there, even though it's a big firm, we have all these smaller divisions within the firm, right? And the firm kind of gets taken care of, and it's a partnership. So each little partnership is actually a business in its own. And the thing is, where I started learning about entrepreneurship is 2 things. First of all, letting go of what my title is relating to my skill set, and then starting to focus on making that little unit successful as a business, to understand what it means as a business. Because I think entrepreneurs are fundamentally people who understand how a business runs, how that business can be turned into a system so it becomes sustainable, and then also profitable and has a long-term view on things. Because I think sometimes, and like Dennis said, I think that is also sometimes the spirit when you say entrepreneurial in the business, is that it's like senior people letting go of their responsibility to run the business and giving it to younger people coming in and say, listen, just go make, and I don't want to swear, shit happen. Just go there and make it happen. You're on your own, make your magic. And that, I don't think that is entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, it's focusing on, becoming someone who focuses on how to run a business, doing it successfully. And I'm going to stop rambling now and give Joshua a chance to say something too.
That's good. Joshua.
Yeah, Vanna, just building off sort of some of the things that you said, I think, and to Jens address the question, what is an entrepreneurial culture? And I think, you start with continuity and experimentation. And how do you create a mindset, one, but also a framework that you allow that to be created inside? And I think that inside an organization, and to some of the points that Dennis raised around the space that needs to be created to allow something like that to develop. Is it right for every team? Is it right for every person inside that organization? But I think a big part of it is allowing people to have that opportunity to explore and to experiment and to create. Because I think sometimes in terms of organizational structures, we can become too siloed and too one-minded in terms of how we approach things. And then, linking back to a point that Vanna made around, too often I think that when we think about entrepreneurship as a skill set, we forget that it's actually a mindset as well. Because in order to make magic happen, you need to sort of shift the way that you think. You can't just approach things with the same mindset or the same way of thinking that you've been taught to think through things. You often need to experiment and create to fail and learn along the way.
That's an awesome start. Dennis, you want to say something?
Yeah, so this leads into the idea that it's very difficult to get people to change their mindsets. And when you get people high up in the chain saying that they need the culture to be more entrepreneurial, then, like you say, you need to create spaces where that is allowed. So you are you have an open carte blanche to go and do whatever you need to do to move forward and explore, experiment, and create, like you said. So in these three words, I think there are already huge challenges. If you want to get people to explore, you need to make it comfortable enough for them to do it and make it uncomfortable enough to make it interesting, but not too difficult. And then when you want to experiment, they need to know that it's okay to fail, which is another huge obstacle to go past.
Yeah.
And when you get to the point where you actually have to create something, when people have not had the training to create something, when they are part or when they've learned how to be in a functional role or do something as part of a whole and not separately start something new in their own right or with a team or going from nothing to something. That's also a huge step. So it sounds very alluring to say, well, we have to adapt an entrepreneurial growth mindset. Everybody wants to have the growth mindset. But the problem is that a lot of people who have gone to design school, for instance, they have learned that it's very hard to keep that going because they've learned how to do it over a long period of time. And once they actually get into the corporate environment, it is not like they've learned. They had freedom to design at university or at trade school or whatever. And then when you get to a corporate environment, the acceleration is so immense that there's no space for them to explore and experiment, and they're only part of something that needs to be accountable at the end of the week or the month or by the end of a sprint, or and everybody loses their perspective on how they literally can be entrepreneurial. And because
maybe to that point, just quickly, Dennis, do you think then one of the things is that we're using the wrong metrics to measure things and the wrong scores of value to underline performance, which potentially can negatively impact the way that we think about creativity and the way and the spaces that we create for people to be entrepreneurial?
So I think metrics are a huge thing, because the idea about metrics is to see if you are successful in a certain space in time, in an environment, which is a part of control. And when we're saying we need to explore and experiment, then we need to be free. We need to be set free of frames of control. And which does not mean that a goal or an objective is not something that you don't need. Personally, I am a very chaotic person. If I do not have an objective to whatever I'm doing, I space out, I get lost. I need a goal to work towards. Otherwise, I start to ramble.
I would like to lift us up again. So it's awesome. We will go into change spaces, growth mindset, and the other topics as well in a later stage. So we touched on the topic entrepreneurship. We haven't dove too much into culture. For me, it's like that's a topic. So how do we define culture in an organization? How do we think about that? Let's start with Werner.
That's a difficult one for me to answer, actually. I think the first comment I'll make is that the culture, and this sounds like a bit blasé, right? But the culture comes from the top, right? It really comes from the leadership. And I've seen it now with some of the clients that I've worked with. So if the CEO has a kind of entrepreneurial spirit and he passes that down to whoever reports into him, and he builds the organization around that culture of entrepreneurship, that's when I think it starts taking, it sticks. What that culture is and what that is defined as, I would like to pass it on to my colleagues on the panel to dive into that. But I've really seen that I've believed in the past that a boer maak 'n plan, right? When you're in a situation, no matter what the circumstance, you make a plan to make things work and have that entrepreneurial spirit. But as an organization, it needs to come from the top down.
Joshua, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great starting point, Van. And, before we started recording, we were talking about how do you present yourself? And especially in this digital world that we now live in and that we're conversing over, many of us are wearing, T-shirts. And there's a perception out there in terms of what that means and how you are perceived inside of that space. And I think that that's an interesting starting point to think about culture from, because when one talks about an entrepreneur, what is the first thing that comes to mind? Is it, the Steve Jobs of the world where they were walking around in sandals, rolled up jeans and turtleneck sweaters? Or is it like Jens has his applied innovation T-shirt on? What is the first thing that comes to mind? And I think that's quite interesting when you start unpacking that, because we already have preconceived ideas around culture. And it's one thing building that out and growing that inside an organization. But Vanna, to your point, it definitely does come down from the top or from the senior levels inside an organization. But I also think it's the type of people that you bring into an organization. And, Jim Collins in Good to Great and Beyond Entrepreneurship, he talks about starting with the who. And I think that that's quite an important thing, is when you start thinking about cultures, how are you bringing around the right people to either further that culture or to create a culture inside an environment that then promotes entrepreneurial thinking and a creative mindset.
Yeah, love that. Grown up in IKEA, there was always one of the topics was you need to be a good example as a leader in an organization, because that's the only way how people truly do what you're saying. So not just force people to do, it's also help them understand and help them see what you're doing. So when you're that's how you got trained when you're a store manager or a leader inside an IKEA store. It's like you pick up the trash, because everyone will see that you as a manager, as a leader, pick up the trash, and others will follow you. And that was done by the founder of the business when he was visiting stores. So you can imagine how people see that working in that company. And that's, I think, one of the big topics for me as well, where that's a culture which is true a culture, which is not a forced culture. It's like you see that and people see that good example, and people will follow or want to follow that good example.
So
Dennis.
That's a good point. So there's a difference between, like you say, true culture, which I maybe define it like if you have a company like that has been run by a family for 50 years, and there's craftsmen that are really good at creating, let's say, bikes. Really good at what they're doing. They've grown into it. They've never done anything else. They're 40-year veterans, part of the development of great bikes over the years. when you're working inside of a company and you taste what people are doing in their craft, I would say that is, to me, is true culture. You know, when you walk inside of a space and you can smell and you can feel that people are doing things in a certain way, then you can feel true culture. But this happens on different levels. So somebody who is being a very good craftsman or woman improves constantly, but their focus lies on improving their craft constantly, and they are constantly doing the same thing, but repeating it, and getting better at it and better at it. And then something great happens. You have people who want to have more bikes, and the family company starts to instantly, at some point, out of some kind of a fluke, starts to grow. And from the 50 people, now suddenly you have about 75. And then because there is something great that you're doing, now you have 150. And now you have tripled the amount of people in your company. And now something interesting happens, because here you get people who are part of the old crew and the old mindset of doing things right, or doing and then you have new people who might challenge and say, well, you are doing things in the right way, but maybe we can, are you doing the right things? No, and because they haven't challenged their thinking in all that time, and then you get new people and a new culture coming in, and then you get a clash between old craftsmen and young bucks trying to create their space create their place in a space. And then there's even a difference in the fact that when you have all these craftspeople becoming better at what they're doing, then you have new people who are even younger, who have been trained to think in new concepts. And let's call them innovators. Let's call them designers and creatives, who are now saying, well, let's make a bike with 3 wheels. And the people who have been doing their thing for a long time, they're saying, what? What are you saying? Then that idea of, and then we get to the entrepreneurial spirit a little bit, because the people who are in that fixed, maybe true culture, they fix things. When something is broke, everybody is part of fixing it, but they tend to fix it and not renew it and make it better. They tend to fix it around in a space where they just plaster it until it doesn't break. And the idea is that when you are ready and when you're growing into a bigger culture, it's interesting to say, well, let's do it in a different way. And what would that look like? And that people who are entering into that domain usually are entrepreneurial people, because we need them to explore, we need them to experiment, and we need them to create new structures that are imposed and shared with people who may not want to change. So in that sense, the true culture is different from the culture that maybe somebody who wants to make a lot of money or wants to have a legacy they want to leave behind. They say, well, our culture is this and this and these 3 terms. We had a whole team figure out the 3 values of the company, which has nothing to do with the people who are actually working in it. You know, and then you say, we want to be like this. Well, you need to get everybody together to become something like that. So there's a difference in being and becoming. And the becoming part, I think you need entrepreneurs to explore, experiment, and create. I like those 3 words, Joshua. Sorry for rambling.
That's good. I think that there's a lot of truth in that. I wouldn't call it like the true culture. I would more call it the origin culture, because for me, it's a culture need to evolve with the business, need to evolve with the company and what it is about. Because the culture fit maybe to that, let's say it's 5 people in that bike store shop. It fitted at that time in that specific space. But if they're going towards, let's say, global market reach, whatever, they need to change their culture going forward so that the culture is evolving. And I think that's what makes really, really good leaders, who understand that the culture needs to evolve and they let it happen. Even if it's maybe it's itching them that this might not be the right culture. But as the founder entrepreneur, that's what you need to see and then step back. And I think that's even also interesting for companies that are just starting, is how do you build the first culture? How does the first culture happening? And for me, it's at least in my experience, I try to orchestrate that in a way that it is happening rather than forcing it. And it's not from a theory, hey, these are our 10 values and that's how we're doing. If you're 5 people, that's not needed to have a structure like a formal public company, because everyone is part of it. Everyone will work in one or the other way. Everyone is knowing everything if you set it up in that way.
But I really like the word, the first culture. First culture, which implies there are more cultures over time.
Yeah.
This is something that not a lot of people can do. They cannot step back and look what it meant to have a certain a basic startup culture, to grow from one person to 30 people, and that fit was perfect for that time. And then when you move on, there's a second culture, which means you have to consolidate, and you have to create processes and standardize, do all kinds of things that the first culture might not want to do, and make it ready for a continuity beyond that first culture. And I'm wondering how many cultures there are.
Well, that's a good question.
I have
a very good question.
I have a comment and a question. So my first comment, and this is kind of like a practical tip. I just read it the other day and I realized that I've seen it in my own career, is that, how do you kind of figure out if your culture is good or bad? Because remember, some of us have to instill this culture. And there's a guy called David Burkus, and he wrote a book, blah, blah, blah. But like the way you can look at it, if you have to manipulate people to follow your lead and follow your culture and follow what you want to do, then you have a problem.
Yeah.
If you find that in your work, and I've seen it with some of the teams I work with and some of the companies I work for, the only thing you have to do to get people going is to inspire them. So I remember when I was at advertising agency working with the likes of Lee Clow, they will come on a screen and then sit there in their sandals and tell a story. And then you walk out, you're so inspired, you can do your stuff. But then in some companies where I've worked, is like the CEO or whatever has to manipulate people to do things. So I think it's a nice like little test if you're not sure where your culture is in your organization or even in your team for yourself, because sometimes we're the guys who screw up. The other thing I wanted to ask you guys is, because I'm getting a bit befuddled here, is that there is I come from a background where people were really pushing and they were using the word innovation culture. We have to instill a culture of innovation in the organization. And at the moment in the panel, we're talking about a culture of entrepreneurship and then a culture of innovation. What is the difference? For me, you can really get stuck between the two and maybe talk about the one and actually refer to the other one. Like, what is the difference between the two? Is there a difference, or do they plug in? Or I really would like to know what you guys think.
Another good question.
Joshua?
Shall I start, or
Jens, I think we're going to give this one to you, because
you're the innovation guy.
I'm getting
life,
the
Jens.
hard questions.
Yeah. I'll follow in from your kickoff.
No, I love that question, because it's a difficult question indeed. For me, let's dive into how I define entrepreneurship culture first. So entrepreneurship culture for me is the true understanding of everyone working inside of the business, of what the business is and how they can contribute to the business with their way of thinking, with their way of acting. And allowing this to happen is, I agree with the top-down approach, but I think it's more from a leadership approach, which is like empowering your organization to be entrepreneurial as a leader rather than forcing the organization to do it.
Yeah.
So that's for me very, very important, because that's long-term successful. Innovation for me is, there can be different ways of innovation cultures. For me, it is a step up from the entrepreneurial culture in a way. So yes, you contribute to your business, but the innovation culture for me is as well in looking into challenging your business rather than just focusing on supporting your business in the best way. It's like, how do you take your business out of business from an innovation perspective? How do you take it to the next level? Which I know is as well a little bit entrepreneurship, but it's for me, it's a different mindset from understanding how you can challenge and question what you're doing on a daily basis and question your culture, everything what's going on from an innovation perspective, to say, not to destroy the business, but with the understanding that if we work in this way, if we keep our business in this way for the next 20 years, we will not be successful. So what do you need to change to be able to grow, to be able to have more impact in this world? That's for me the difference. Joshua.
Yeah, so I think Jens, you raised a number of great points there, and Van, it's a superb question, and definitely gives me a lot of food for thought. And I think to start off, maybe I'd start answering your question with another question: is entrepreneurship and an entrepreneurial mindset right for every business? Because just as the way that people are different people need and use different mindsets to thrive and grow and develop as they go on through their journey. So I think, to answer the question, and I think there's many things that I would take from Jens and agree with what Jens mentioned, but slightly differently, in the sense that I think entrepreneurial mindset and the culture is sort of the overarching side of things. And it's something that we raised right at the beginning of the conversation about the willingness to understand and create a continuous structure and an ever-evolving business. And that is informed by an innovation culture. And I think that the difference between them is where you're really you're talking about business continuity and forward thinking, and also evaluating what you're doing wrong and what you're doing right. But inside an innovation culture, you're pushing yourself to think differently. You're pushing yourself to experiment. And not to say that doesn't exist separately in an entrepreneurial culture, but I think that inside teams and specific entities, inside organizations, an innovation culture can exist in isolation and separate from the overall entrepreneurial culture inside of that same organization. So it's sort of informed by the other, but definitely the entrepreneurial culture sort of is the overarching framework and mindset that I see it working within.
Because sorry, Dennis, I don't want to talk over you, because the reason I asked the question is and I think we can look at things different ways, is that when I think about entrepreneurship, and Dennis, you'll identify with this comment I'm going to make, is that it's about working on the business, not in the business, right? But the problem is, or the challenge is that you also need people to work in the business. So while when I was in Deloitte and I was working with the partner, we were driving the business. So we were looking at the numbers, we were connecting with clients, we were nurturing and growing the business. We were working on the business. But then while we were doing that, we still required a whole team of people to work in the business, to deliver the work, to create the value for the customers we have. But then when I looked at my team that was working in the business, I expected from them to challenge the systems that we're working in. I wanted them to be innovative, to turn around things in a different way, to become more efficient. So, I think, like you said, Joshua, they can work together. But then I'm not making entrepreneurship or the business side more important than innovation, because, like we've now seen in the pandemic, a lot of organizations had to innovate and change the meaning of their organizations really fast. And then the innovation part actually sits as like a driven thing that kind of have to pivot your business to something new. So it doesn't have to be this hard and fast rule, right? Yeah.
So on that, maybe, Vanden, that's an interesting point that you raised. Could innovation culture and an innovation mindset be a tool that sits inside your entrepreneurial tool shed?
So I want to go a little bit back, because that's a good thought. But I want to go back to something that Werner said about the fact that you, when you're working in the business, you want people to innovate and become more efficient. I think there's a huge difference between improving yourself and innovating yourself. So improving yourself is something you do to literally be better at what you're doing, and that your value within the company rises. You do a course in that to improve your skill or improve your perspective on what it is that you're doing, improve your function or your role. But when you actually think about something new, how you grow towards something you are becoming instead of what you are, you go into a space which is sometimes not very comfortable for people because it's unsure. You don't know what you're going to be. You don't know what you want. You don't know what's there. There's people who are really good at that. Those people are innovators. There's people who want to jump in and go into a space where you're working on the business or where you're at least going outside of that loop that you're trying to improve yourself constantly. And this is where you develop. And there's a huge difference between improving yourself and developing yourself.
So, can I react to that?
Of course.
So I do, Dennis, I do, of course, agree with you, right? Because I also think that sometimes people see innovation and then it's actually just incremental improvement, right? So iPhone 12 is not innovation, it's just an incremental improvement. Yeah. But perhaps technology within the app, within the phone or certain smaller things is innovative, right? And I do see, I've seen it in some of my teams that I've led before, right? That, and I think that we also need to be careful there that we don't task them to be better entrepreneurs if we need them to be innovators, right? Mm-hmm. So in my teams, for example, I didn't expect people to become incrementally better. That's what the organization wants them to do anyway, because we do KPIs in the year and say, did you incrementally get better? Yeah. 10%? Okay, cool. Here's your bonus. But then I had the privilege to work with people who looked at their tasks within the organization and said, okay, cool. We can do this much better. In fact, we don't have to do this. We can do it this way. So they changed the whole, like that. Yeah. It's still delivered because I think sometimes we need to be careful. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but I think sometimes we scare people with the word innovation. And I know this conversation of innovation where, okay, cool, we're going to innovate. So we're going to redefine the whole business. We're going to fire all the old people. And now we're going that way, right? That doesn't have to happen. You can also innovate within your team, innovate within, and I think as an entrepreneur, I want to make space for people that I work with to be able to innovate. Of course, I'm not saying it discounts the bigger things that you need to do to shift the organization in a different direction. But then, you have to kind of have the business people and innovation people work together. But yeah, rabbit hole.
Sorry. Dennis, you go first.
Very short. So I like when you're rambling in that sense, and when I'm rambling, because you tend to say things, nuggets that are really, really interesting. And two words that make Joshua's triple helix idea of exploring, experimenting, and creating put some spotlight on a space between exploring and experimenting is making space. And this is what you said, which that triggers my thinking. It's like when you are outside of looking at how you're innovating something, you tend to spot spaces where you need to make space for people to be entrepreneurial, and then start to innovate or incrementally get better. And maybe even when you are ready to implement your bigger innovation, make a step towards revising their wheel that they're working in, because you are working on the wheel. And in that sense, it's interesting to say that making space, and this is true to anything that's changing, making space is one of the biggest things that needs to happen for people to entertain the thought of changing or entertain. And so in that sense, I'm bringing innovation into the realm of change, because you're changing something that is maybe not broken, but because you have forward vision, you say, well, we need to keep moving because otherwise we're going to stand still and we're going to die. And this is a concept that is foreign to people who are doing good work and they don't understand why they need to change. And we need to give them a way to understand that evolving their way of working is a good thing, but they tend to react in a different way. And this is where your tool comes in, Joshua, where you need to figure out where an entrepreneurial tool set helps you to make space.
agree. That's a valid point. I would like to challenge you guys a little bit on. I don't believe on the topic of you work on the business and in the business. For me, that's creating a hierarchy, and that makes the change even harder. For me, it's like I would see it in a way like you work with the business the whole time. It doesn't matter if you're thinking you work on the business, but and I think that's specifically from an entrepreneurial culture to get us a little bit out of the innovation space again. We talked about the good example. If the good example is just orchestrating it from the top and it is not working with the topics within, nobody will take this person for doing true business. So that's why I rather see it in with the business. Werner, shoot.
Yeah, so I think I don't agree with you there. I think there is a distinction, but I think the distinction is really important for folks like myself. And I'll take you, Jens, you and me as an example. So this is not going out nationally, right? I'm not telling all my business secrets.
No.
so I'll share
Globally.
candidly. Globally. Woo, okay.
It's anyhow nobody listening to it.
I'll tell you where, I've now had my own business now for 2 years, right? So, well, a year and a half or so. And a couple of months ago, we had a sit down and we had a really discreet conversation about what we are doing. And your example for me became a real insight into what I've been doing wrong and seeing how I can actually change my business and how I have to change my mindset. Because I think for a lot of people like myself, we think we are working on a business to make, to create an entrepreneurship or whatever, but actually what we're doing is we're doing freelance work. We are selling our time to other people. We're doing all the work ourselves. I've just made my own coffee. Then later on, I'm going to do all my accounting, all these other things. When you're working on the business, you start realizing what are your strengths, and then you are able to give over some of the other things that are more systematized things within your business to people who can repetitively do that. So, for example, we spoke about video editing and all these other kind of things, is that, I still do a lot of my own video editing, but I could actually just farm that out to someone who's probably much better than me, make them part of my business, and then focus on growing my business more and actually focus on the impact that I want to create with the videos that I'm creating, right? So I think that is maybe the on and in kind of thing is more for people like myself to say, Werner, are you really keeping yourself busy with working inside the business and focusing on all the things and the logos instead of actually going out and making sure that you're connecting with your customers, actually driving the business forward and growing the business rather than trying to work yourself to death every night. So that's kind of where I make the distinction between what that is,
So I understand where Jens is coming from with the with, because it does sound a bit elitist to say, well, you guys are in the hamster wheel and we are on the outside creating the wheel, in that sense. But I totally understand. But I think I totally agree that when you want to grow from going from one person and seeing that repetitive functionality that you don't want to do anymore fits within your business model, then that's a way for you to grow. But what if this happens for a company of about 100 people? Then you need separate people who are looking at managing what's happening inside, and people who get space to work on the outside. And then I would say the with idea that Jens brings in, I really like that thought, but it's mainly to do with the fact that you take people along on all levels. You need to connect what's happening in and on, because when they are separate, you only make it difficult for yourself to come in with a story that you created a better system, and then you need to kind of force it on people instead of making it part of their own way of thinking. So I think it's maybe also, if you look at this in time, this is where culture changes. You are now a culture of one. You're very nice in what you're doing. I am in that same culture. I love what I do, and then when I make the decision to alter my business model to allow for other people to help me to grow my business, then culture starts, So this is where it starts to create something different.
Joshua, I think you want to go first, so I'll keep my mouth shut before adding to that.
Yeah, so I think it's a fascinating, a couple of concepts to get your head around. And one of the things, Dennis, I think you shared a lot of what I was thinking as well. And two words that I wrote down were connection and community. And I think that's an extremely important terminology that an entrepreneur needs to be conscious of when they are building out and the transition between the different phases of their business. And I think, we've spoken already about continuity and how an entrepreneur takes different steps. You might take one step today, but 10 steps tomorrow. And how do you take people along for that journey? And something that, just circling back to, we were talking about the number of people and how do you keep and foster an entrepreneurial mindset, whether it be top down, whether it be working on with or for the business. And how do you do that? And I can't remember the exact terminology or phrase for this right now, but it's in a book called Moonshots. And Safi Bakal is the author, and you guys might be familiar with it. And he talks about there's a transition between where teams become optimal and where they start to, descale, and then you need to start thinking differently about the type of culture. And I think that in using an entrepreneurial mindset to do that, we are creating an environment inside an organization where it's not just transactional, but it's actually you exchanging value inside of that space. And I think that that's very important for people to actually recognize that you are dealing, and Jens, you talk a lot about this in the concepts that you're producing and the way that you lead around valuing people and how are you keeping people included inside of that process. And I think that that's, just some comments and some thoughts around working on with and for the business. And that's, where my mind was thinking around those things.
Yeah, and just as a side note to what Dennis also said, I think also why I kind of hang on to this idea of on. I also want to just clarify the on idea is not necessarily to say, okay, cool, wearing a suit, going to the golf course and then closing deals. The on is also about setting up the culture that your team works in. Because the one thing that I see with a lot of the leaders that I work with, they're so busy in their inbox that they don't have time to focus on the people that work for them because there's micromanagement, there's no trust to people. And I think that if you free yourself up, hand over the trust and have the systems in place and position people properly as a leader, you will instill that culture. Because the thing is, letting people to go do their own stuff or micromanaging is not what we're talking about here. And if you free yourself up as a leader to actually start taking care of the people and then also focusing on the growth of the business, the other stuff will start. So what I'm trying to say is I'm not saying that the on means you're disconnecting from the in people. The important thing that we had to do, for example, at Deloitte, is to make sure that the culture is there. There's space, there's tools, there's growth, there's opportunity. Because the other thing I also wanted to just say at the end is that I also think we need to be careful. There's like kind of two things. So first of all, sometimes when I hear Dennis, I feel like, there is people who resist against entrepreneurship, for example, like they don't want to do it or they feel unsure. But I think there's also a lot of people who have not been given a chance to do that. Mm-hmm. So that's important to give them a chance. But then giving them the chance is not throwing a piece of meat over the wall. It's actually setting it up, taking care, nurturing those people to become the entrepreneurs you want them to be. And then the other thing I would say, though, and this might be controversial, not everybody in an organization wants to be a damn entrepreneur. Because one of the big challenges we faced in Deloitte is that because of and I think this is true for a lot of the professional services, is that there's a structure, right? So you work your way up. So you start as a consultant, and then one day you're going to be a famous partner, right? And you're going to have a lot of money. I never got there. But the thing is, what we started seeing in the technology side, we'll bring in a developer, right? We gave him some shoes and a tie, and now he's starting coding, and he loves it. But he also wants to have a career path. He also wants to grow, but he doesn't want to be a manager or a director or whatever. He wants to be the best damn developer he can be, right? So you have to kind of set up those things and take care of the people that might not want to go in that direction, but then plug them into your into your organization in a meaningful way, and also give them the space to do their thing, because I tell you, we need them.
Yeah. Now can I go first?
Yeah.
This time?
Yeah.
Now, I agree with that point that every person needs to be able to grow in the direction where they want to be. Though I would counter argue that if you work in a business and if you want to work in a successful business, you need to understand how you contribute to that business with what you are doing. So you can be super happy in whatever you want to do in that business, like coding or and not leading other people. You can be a specialist for a specific topic. But I think what is often misunderstood from an entrepreneurial culture, that doesn't matter where you work in the whole ecosystem of that business, you need to understand how you contribute to make it better every day, how you contribute and being
Amen.
part of the business.
Okay, so this is the perfect jumping point to say you have this developer that is becoming the perfect developer, but these are also people that are getting older and they're getting more mature, and their vision and their perspective changes. And not everybody goes into the direction of becoming the perfect coder until they take their pension. And there's going to be people who are saying, well, I see these guys, I see them making the same mistakes, and they really like me. And maybe I'm good at trying to get a team together and help them. And then they find a new focus, which is that they create even more value and they get even more satisfaction from the fact that they empower others to become better developers. And this then becomes something that is a part of a natural flow of things. When you get older, and this is where the Peter principle of being promoted to a point where you don't actually want to be, and you see all CEOs coming back to even Bill Gates coming back to development because he was naturally promoted to that space because he is an entrepreneur. At some point he says, there's people who are doing this better, and I don't like it. I'm going to go back to development, my original space where I like to be. And this is an interesting loop that you go up. And then it also means that when you are in a professional development, in your career, when you go up the loop, when you go up your own growth curve, there's going to be a space that you connect to the best. And I would say the most important thing is to take that space very, very seriously and see how long you're going to stay there. Because it's stupid if you stop your own growth because you feel comfortable, but it's difficult to hear from somebody like a coach or whatever that you should move on, because it's better to move on right now than to hit some kind of a wall later on. And this is the whole idea of focusing more on prevention of something that might happen later on, and looking for new things. And that loops back to the whole entrepreneurial idea, is that I think people who are entrepreneurial, they should, and that's maybe the mindset thing, they are constantly looking for something new. And that is not something that we have taught people inside of their business schools or inside of any art form or any creative or engineering thing. We have not taught them to challenge their own position. And if you create space, you're kind of doing that, but you're doing it without a map. So you're throwing people inside of a big black hole, saying, well, you have to find yourself. And if you come out, very good, you'll be more valuable. But the idea there, of course, is to see if you are the right person to lead a group of other people, because you're getting older. And maybe, that's the stuff that we need to totally push towards the beginning and say, nurture an entrepreneurial spirit within kids, and give them an idea that if you link to the idea that you want to do this, if you're comfortable to do this, it is okay to do it. But don't lose it because you function well in a certain space. You're good at math, so you should go into math, or you should go do something like that. There's people who are miserable in doing something that they're really good at.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's interesting to see how you can link everything to the natural growth curve, and be truthful about what you're doing there at a certain space and time in the development of a company.
And I think that point is exactly, if you are an organization, you will have these people. So, and that's where this culture topic comes in. You need to allow them to do that. And if they're good in what they're doing, good, and have contributed to your business over, let's say, 20 years or whatever, how can you nurture them to do even better in your own organization, to keep the knowledge and keep the spirit inside the own organization, and let them develop inside your business, because that will keep them and that will bring it to the next level.
But it feels a bit manipulative, doesn't it?
No, I think it's more, you need to allow the system to be able to do it, not you as a person. So that's why I always talk about empowerment. You as a leader, CEO, whatever, you need to empower the organization to be able to do it.
But there's a point where you're saying, as a leader, I empower my workforce, and it becomes about something that you are empowering people, and then that's the new thing of becoming, the person that rises to fame because you give space to develop. But it doesn't feel like you should get a claim for giving space. It needs to be a requirement to grow, instead of saying, because what I'm saying is that usually in big companies, you get to stay, you need to be in your own space until you're ready to move on. But it should be the other way around. If you naturally you are going to evolve, you need to have the space to do it. And usually that's not what is controlled in the right way within larger companies.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating point, Dennis, in terms of the way that you sort of flipped it on its head there. And I think it goes back to the question of, does everyone want to be an entrepreneur? And how do you sort of create that mindset where you create a mindset where you actually crave that space, or you go after that space, rather than being given or forced into that space? Because I think that's a big thing in terms of, we're talking about creating and experimenting, is how do you create that environment inside your own mental capacity to want to create that space. Yeah. And I mean, you said it's a requirement, but I might just challenge you around the word requirement and saying it's more sort of you as a person want to have to take that step, because it's not for everyone. And that's something that I think that we do need to unpack as what entrepreneurship actually is.
Yeah, it's kind of like just thinking about it, like innovators seek change, entrepreneurs seek opportunity, because it makes me think about like some of the great entrepreneurs. I have one client at the moment. He drives me insane. I hope he doesn't watch this, but a senior person. And the one thing that I always see with him, and I see him as an entrepreneur and as a big organization, is that he is able to distinguish where opportunity lies. And he's always seeking opportunity. And that opportunity is not always monetary. It's opportunity to grow the business, opportunity to deliver value to his customers, to his board. So it's like this seeking of opportunities. And I think some people have it and some people don't. But then there's also people who seek change. How can I do this differently? Or how can I just change things completely or change the whole organization? So it's,
Have you ever heard about the Golden Dialogue?
No.
The Golden Dialogue is a I think it's called the Golden Dialogue, but it's the idea that if you have the general growth curve, there's different roles that people have on the curve, and the Golden Dialogue is the success a company has when people who are in the starting up phase, thinking of new ideas and focusing on the bigger change, like Steve Jobs. He was in that first space, and connecting that with the entrepreneurial space of looking for opportunity to grow towards the next business. And if you have that loop, connecting the beginning of a company towards the middle and top end, because when you go through the growth curve and when you are at the middle, you already need to start to think about the next curve. And the idea there is if you can connect the bottom of the curve with the top, that's what Tim Cook and Steve Jobs were. Now, Tim Cook was the perfect, in that sense, opportunist to see how you can connect things that maybe are looking for the bigger change in business, how to connect it to the market. And you need to have somebody like an innovator like Jobs, give them free rein to think about what the future might look like. And if you have that conversation that loops around those two ideas, then you get a business that can grow up to be something like Apple. It doesn't happen that often, but I'm wondering if you can set the different cultures that we that we found in this conversation. You have these different cultures. When do you put a culture in place where a CEO, I don't know if the CEO should be an innovator, but when you have a good conversation between the golden conversation between the development of new ideas and the opportunities in the current market space, and that when you are looking at the opportunities in current market space, you need to look 5 years ahead to see how the new ideas get placed into the new market. In that sense, you generate your own continuity in that sense. So that's the golden dialogue idea. And I don't know whose it is, but we should find out. It's a book, I think. But the example that stuck to me was Steve Jobs and Tim Cook. And Tim is now lost. He doesn't have the innovative change mind. And he's being pushed back to an operational center stage where he's alone in what he's doing. And now Apple is... it's still doing great, but is it coming up with the new great things? I heard that they have a VR thing coming up that costs $3,000. So I'm thinking, that's going to be very interesting to see if that innovation turns into our new culture.
I would like to slowly get to an end. So I think it's an interesting format we're testing out right now today. So let's do a rapid fire round of what stand out for you during this conversation today, and what you learned. Let's start with Werner. Then we go to Joshua and Dennis, and I will finish.
I like how you always put me in the spot there, Jens.
Yeah, you're just on the top left corner in my screen.
I mean, I value all the insights here. I mean, I think what I'm definitely going to go away with is really thinking a bit more about, and thanks to your input around the whole idea of the innovation culture and then how entrepreneurial culture plugs into that. I want to investigate that a bit more. So thanks for the inspiration in that direction. That's what I take away from here.
Joshua.
Yeah, well, firstly, Jens, thanks for agreeing to another prototype. It's been a fascinating conversation, and definitely lots of food for thought. One of the things that I certainly will take away is the concept of width, and I think it's a huge thing that we need to understand, especially in this digital age that we're navigating at the moment. Because I think you used the example of the IKEA founder doing certain things inside a business, which instills a culture. How do you create a digital culture and a company culture that you are creating in a digital environment? Because I think that's the next challenge that a lot of businesses are going to face, because it's not easy to identify the width when you are creating culture inside a digital world. So lots of food for thought. Thanks for setting it up, and thanks for everyone's ideas and concepts. Definitely a lot to take away from today.
It's really good. I don't know if I'm able to follow it in that way. It's a perfect summary. It's even opening up the subject of the next one, saying if digital is the next tool to create next cultures, which is something very interesting indeed. But I've circled. I made this drawing, of course, and there's a design pickle in the middle. There's a pickle in the middle, and I like the pickle because the pickle is It's sour. It's kind of but it's also good at the same time. And there's different things that you need to take into account when you go into a conversation about innovation and entrepreneurship. And I think we've created a map a little bit that raises some very interesting questions. I liked, and what I take away is the idea that I like your explore, experiment, create, and Werner's addition to making space that fits into that. I think there's more stuff that we can add to that. Finding the first culture and the next culture, which is very interesting to me. And I would say that Werner, keep on rambling, because I like the innovators seek change and entrepreneurs seek opportunity. That is something also to question and also to seek out what if that's really true. But I'd love to think in black and whites like that to challenge it afterwards. So for me, it was a success and a great prototype. Thanks for setting it up, Jens.
Yeah, I also take a lot away. I will not repeat what you said because I think a lot of interesting thoughts, interesting topics to take forward in different settings as well between us. What's always interesting to explore normally I do one-on-one podcasts or alone topics. It's quite interesting when you put a group of people together exploring a topic without detailed preparation, that you come up with a lot of value, that you come up with a lot of opinions where you basically riff on each other, which creates then new ideas. So that's also something I want to dig more into going forward, is how can you allow space and how can you allow a room for people to riff on each other, to build new ideas, opening up a dialogue about a specific topic. And I think that's one of the first prototypes in that direction, which allowed us to do that. Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you very much for everyone listening, for you guys being on the show. I think it's super cool that you spent the time with me. I know everyone is busy, so it's great. And for everyone who is just listening, there's as well a video version of this. So, and any last words from you guys?
I just want to say thank you, Jens, for allowing us to sit here and talk to you on your platform. I continue to be inspired by your daily updates, and I'm really excited about what you're doing within the innovation space, and always also bringing these people together. But then furthermore, bringing people into this space to grow this mindset. So really excited to see what this is gonna look like in a couple of months. And then it's great to be here with my fellow designers and innovators. And I would just leave you with this, that you will always get a great show if you have more than one South African in it.
That's a good one. Any
Dutch root language.
Any departing words from you guys?
I'm sorry, Joshua, go.
Yeah. So maybe just don't be afraid. Because I think, sometimes in the craziness that we've got going on around us, it's easy to get and feel like you need to protect yourself in cotton wool. But sometimes take the cotton wool off and go and shovel some snow, like Jens has been doing over the last weekend.
Yes.
Because, I think that's just something to keep in mind as we explore what the future has in store for us.
Explore, again, great words. And whenever you explore, I think from my perspective, I love to make stuff that you find along the way visible, so that we can rehash it and turn it into something instead of talking around the subject and we have nothing to stand on. So this can lead to the fact that when we have more of these innovation breakfast topics that we talk about, I'm going to see if I can create some stuff for us to stand on, maybe, and see if we can follow the conversation back and forth in the time that we discuss these things. So good luck in that, Jens, in finding the next topic. I think we found something very interesting in using digital as a tool for innovation culture. But it's been a pleasure. So thank you very much.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for being on the show. And for those who are listening or watching, please like and share if you think it's a value for anyone else in your network. Thank you very much, and see you next time.
Take me to another place where the fairy tales don't end. Magical, magical land, magical, magical land. To another place where the